right. So as I mentioned, it's today we are discussing propaganda, and we'll also take a look at some political cartoons to kind of, and this will also kind of bridge with some of that historical information. We'll talk a little bit about history, build that historical context like we talked about yesterday. And propaganda, which we'll cover more in the Essential Ed lesson, it's basically, we've all seen it. We're familiar with it in one way or another. We encounter it basically on a daily basis. But propaganda is, it's information that's typically of a misleading or biased nature. And it's, it's promoting or publicizing a lot of times some type of political cause or a political idea, or, a certain point of view that it wants the viewer or the reader to, take on. So this is one of those classes, I mentioned earlier on, as far as like one of the objectives I hope you guys take away from these classes is the, being able to think critically about what you read and what you see because of all the information that we get. And so that is really one of the things that we're going to see a lot today. It's something that will carry through for your life. Every time that you see a political ad, you're going to start thinking about it in terms of propaganda. What's missing? What are they saying? What type of rhetorical techniques are they using to try to convince me to, vote for this candidate or, take on this particular political idea or opinion? So let's take a look here, first off, with political cartoons, which is related to propaganda, but it's usually more focused about political commentary, right? We see them now, even on social media. Memes are an extension of political cartoons a lot of times, when it has a political idea involved. But these in particular are, illustrations. So let's take a look at our audio here, or listen to our audio.
Political cartoons are drawings that are intended to make political or social statements. These cartoons communicate the opinions of the artists who draw them. These individuals, known as political cartoonists, often use their editorial skills and humor or satire to make their points. Political cartoonists may also use a caricature, or an exaggerated representation of a thing or a person's physical features, to present a point of view. By interpreting political cartoons, you can gain valuable first-hand knowledge of the different ways that people viewed historical events during the time in which they were happening. As with other areas of the GED test, the skill of interpreting political cartoons will test your ability to interpret information at various depth of knowledge levels through the use of complex reading skills and thinking skills.
Yeah, so it's just adding more knowledge, it's giving you some background as far as history goes. And this was something, oddly, that students from our last session had a lot of trouble sort of understanding. And I know some of that is because of the historical, background that a lot of these are going to take. And I also kind of came to the conclusion that for, somebody that grew up in the U.S. like me, I think we're just generally cynical, and we just, that type of humor seems to connect with us more. But we'll go through them and get a little background here, both on some historical information and some political commentary. So yeah, right off the bat here, this one we have this guy chopping down a tree, and we'll work through it because everything in the illustration usually has some type of symbology, and like it mentioned also caricatures. So how they represent different people, particularly, obviously with political cartoons, you see a lot of former politicians, and how they're portrayed is really going to tell you a lot about what is going on in the cartoon, right? If you see a a caricature of someone, and they're, they look all dumpy and, disheveled and stuff like that, that political cartoon is probably sort of attacking them. Whereas on the other side, if they're like, shown being really strong or, really patriotic and things like that, it's probably a different take, right? It's something in support of something that they're doing. But anyway, so this one here, the tree is representing saloons, basically bars, in the late 1800s. So the text on the side says the Prohibition Party formed in the mid 1800s and campaigned for several years to outlaw the production, sale, and transportation of alcoholic beverages. It is the oldest minor U.S. political party, and it still exists today. From time to time, it has nominated candidates for state and local office in nearly every state. So that was a huge movement, starting around the mid 1800s to outlaw the sale of alcohol for consumption. Like, you could still manufacture it for medical purposes and things like that. But for, just, kicking back and having a beer, there's a huge movement. And eventually it was successful because there was a prohibition movement in the 1900s. And for a couple of decades there was federal laws that prohibited the sale of alcohol. And that gave rise in part to a lot of organized crime figures in the 1920s and 1930s, like Al Capone, that you may have heard of. That's one way that he sort of rose to fame, was by, bootlegging alcohol. And, like through the South, you hear about moonshiners and stuff like that. That's why that activity became popular, because and there's speakeasies where people would go, these underground clubs where they could get alcohol. So what's represented here in the illustration, like it says in text box A, this is symbols such as the axe blade is showing, chopping into the tree. And it's basically conveying the message of the political cartoon. So you see on the axe head, I'll try to zoom in on this a little bit. The text on these cartoons sometimes are pretty light. So take a look. But at the top, on the axe it says vote, right? And it's cutting down the saloons. So the idea here, the guy cutting down the tree is sort of the voter. And in the second caption, or in the second box there, it says captions that may appear below a cartoon help clarify the cartoon's meaning. Oftentimes, just like everything else, they'll have a title, right? That'll get you some information about what's going on there. The caption underneath there, which is kind of even hard for me to see at this point, it says, "Woodman, spare that tree, touch not a single bough. In youth, it sheltered me, and I'll protect it now." So the person that's saying that is the figure in the back, who's the politician. And so finally, on that last text box, it says political cartoons often include labels. So the Woodman is labeled the Prohibition Party. It's a little tag there under his arm. And the man running is labeled politician. So he's the one saying the words in the caption. So basically what this is saying is that the politician has protected the sale of alcohol, and so producers of alcohol through the years have helped protect him, probably as lobbyists, probably have donated money to his campaigns and things like that. So that's the idea here, is that the Woodman is sort of tired of of alcohol sales, right? Because the Prohibition movement was really about temperance, right? This was a sin to drink, and particularly to excess. And that was a very large movement. So it's sort of like coming to a head here. They're going to, with their vote, destroy the saloons. So that's largely the idea that's presented in this political cartoon. All right, so we'll move over and we'll look at a few questions here, some more illustrations. Right, our first questions is going to be on this, and it's the same text. So if you were to encounter this on a test, usually they'll have some type of introduction for you. by the time you got to that as well, you'll have plenty of background information as far as, like I mentioned with Prohibition movement and other historical events. And we're going to connect all that knowledge there. So if anything appears on your test, it's not going to just be, random little bits of information. All right. And so the text here, right, says political cartoons express editorial commentary, just like I said, or an opinion. As you examine the words, pictures, or symbols in political cartoons, consider how these items express the artist's viewpoints and how different individuals, like I mentioned too, are represented within that illustration, right? And like I said here, the woman is the big, strong guy representing sort of the population, and we have the sort of little chubby, short politician, right, who's sort of taking advantage of his status and his office, and that's coming back to haunt him now. All right. So question 1, this is, which of the following do the depictions of the two figures in the cartoon suggest about the cartoonist's viewpoint on prohibition? Jessica, let's lead off with you. What do you think that means?
Okay, so the cartoonist believes that the politicians are rightfully concerned about prohibition. B, the cartoonist believes that the Prohibition Party is right in trying and outlaw alcohol. Cartoonist fears that the Prohibition Party is pursuing their goals recklessly. D, the cartoonist suggests that many politicians support I'm going to jump on the limb and say A.
So cartoonist believes the politicians are rightfully concerned.
No. I take that back. C.
Cartoonist fears the Prohibition Party is pursuing their goals recklessly. Actually, it's B. The cartoonist, you could tell that he's pro-prohibition, right? He's thinking that they're in the right. So, the idea here is that, the Prohibition Party is just right in their idea about prohibiting the sale of alcohol. Again, think about how they're represented. Now, if this guy was characterizes as, maybe evil looking or, crazy, had like crazy eyes or something like that. But he just has sort of a serious look, and he, looks fairly like a common man. So that kind of gives you the idea there. And this kind of relates to, what we discussed on point of view. When we talk about, what is the artist, where is their viewpoint coming from? So here, the cartoonist thinks that, basically the party is right to try to outlaw alcohol. Okay, a little background on the Great Depression here. So our text says that following the stock market crash of 1929, President Herbert Hoover sought to minimize the effects of the crash on the economy of the United States. American farmers were earning much less than before, and they could not pay their mortgages and bills. Without these payments, rural banks failed. After 1932, drought conditions plagued the Midwest, adding to existing agricultural problems. Industries failed, and factories and stores closed. And I'm going to give you guys a lot more background on the Great Depression later. But after the stock market crash of 1929 was not the cause of the Great Depression in the 1930s. It was largely a symptom. It sort of denoted the start of it. This was a global depression, and it's sort of like the recession and the inflation that we're seeing now. This was widespread, and it did sort of get started in the U.S. There were countries, particularly Germany, that were really hardly hit by the Great Depression. But what it says then here now, between 1929 and 1933, 5,000 American banks collapsed. 1 in 4 farms went into foreclosure, and an average of 100,000 jobs vanished each week. By 1932, more than 12 million Americans were unemployed. Part of President Hoover's plan to improve the nation's economy involved working with business and labor leaders. All right, so he was the president at the beginning of the Great Depression. So this one, part of the issue here with the Great Depression, when it comes to the stock market, speculation was a huge, speculation is a big part of investment banking and, playing the stock market, right? You speculate on the growth of an industry or a company. And in the 1920s, the stock market got really hot, and a lot of that was due to speculation, and they kept pumping money into it. And part of the reason it collapsed was, or we had the crash, was it sort of overheated. So there was, some regulations and stuff, and that was considered, part of the issue. So we see Herbert Hoover here, right? And we see him setting up a detour around speculation. So seeing that as a problem and speculating, that even with, like right now, the price of gas, right? Some of that has to do with speculation because of, we get to the summer months and we tend to use more fuel, right? Because people are traveling, they're going on vacation. So gas prices tend to be a little higher anyway. And just, with supply and demand, which we'll talk about more later as well, a lot of the price of gas is based on just speculation, right? So that became an issue because basically in the 1920s, they thought, well, the stock market's just going to keep going and keep going. It's never going to fall. And obviously, when we get to 1929, it did. It took a huge hit. And that was really the first time. There had been a few dips, little recessions, stuff like that in our economic history. But when we got to that one, it was a crisis. It was, we still haven't seen one. What we're going through right now is not great, obviously. The recession in the late 2000s, like 2000, 2008, that was pretty bad, but nothing compared to what people went through during the Great Depression in the 1930s. So Hoover, as president, is working with businesses here and trying to reroute them so they are not speculating. That's the street that he's basically closing down and setting up a detour. All right, so with that in mind, so which of the following statements best describes the cartoon's depiction of President Hoover? Nautica, how about you give that one a try?
I think it is D.
D as in dog, or B as in boy?
D as in dog.
Okay, it's B. So okay. He's shown guiding the country economy back to stability. So, we can see here the way he's characterized, he's not really shown as weak or ineffective, right? He's got the kind of big head, but that's what characters, look like. If you ever, go to the beach or certain, touristy spots, they'll have people that draw your caricature, and you have them do, have your roller skating or playing guitar or whatever. And that's a very typical kind of idea. But, he's at work here, right? His jacket's off. He's got his little hammer and everything. So it's showing that he's wanting to work, that he's trying. So the other sort of, answers here are shown as unsure of the correct course. Now he's certainly planting, that route there and hammering that in. Or shown as wary of supporting big business during this crisis. Hoover was a Republican. He was pro-business, and he worked more while he was in office. FDR is elected as the next president. Hoover is not reelected. So a lot of his policies were to try to get the country out of the Great Depression, were aimed at business and banking, not at the individual as much. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that down the road. But B is in boy, right? He is trying to guide the country here. And, just as far as the illustrator's viewpoint, this is somebody who is likely, pro Hoover. He is in support of Hoover and his policies. All right, and another question here about Hoover. So we'll try Kate here. So Kate, which of the following does the cartoonist identify as the cause of the economic crash?
I think the D.
D? Is that what I heard?
Yeah.
So C.
Speculation.
Yeah. Nautica, yeah, C there. So speculation, right? That's what he's trying to route businesses around. And in honesty, it was a perfect storm of calamities that created the Great Depression. Speculation was part of it. Stock market was part of it, but there was a whole other bunch of things that just compiled to cause that economic crisis at the end of 1929. But what it's showing here is that speculation was certainly one of them. So C for 3. And we got a new one here. So this is FDR. So we'll read the passage here and take a look at Roosevelt, at what's going on here. This is interesting because it's something that has been that has come up during Joe Biden's presidency. So we'll see that there's some historical context here. So in February 1937, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt proposed legislation that would increase the number of U.S. Supreme Court justices from 9 to 15. For each justice over the age of 70, a total of 6 at the time, he would be empowered to appoint a new justice. This would have altered a court that had struck down some of his proposed New Deal programs. After 6 months of hearings and debates in Congress, the president's plan failed. So, we've been hearing a lot about the Supreme Court as of late. It skews conservative because the justices that have been appointed at this point were appointed by more Republican presidents. And there was some fear that, Joe Biden might try to expand the number of Supreme Court justices so he could nominate and appoint more justices. That's not going to happen. But, to sort of tilt it back because, right now, what we see, when it comes to Supreme Court rulings, they basically rule on whether or not laws are constitutional. Right, that's their job. So in Roosevelt's time, in 1937, right, he's the president that's after Hoover, and in 1937, he is still dealing with the Great Depression, and he's trying to start what is the New Deal programs, which is all the slew of legislation and executive orders to get the economy back on its feet, and they're aimed more towards helping individuals. More so than helping, businesses and things like that. But he runs afoul of the Supreme Court several times where they, sort of knocked down. Now, he did get a lot of legislation passed. He got a lot of executive orders through, and there was a lot of New Deal programs that were successful. But there was other things that he wanted to do that the Supreme Court, said, no, you can't do that. So he spent a lot of time trying to expand the court. And that is the idea here represented in the illustration. So it says, those 6 extra justices, so the 6 extra members that he would attempt to appoint, and the time wasted in trying to expand the court, court packing, as they call it. And we see the sword, stabbed in his court changing plan there, or court change plan. And the caption underneath says, "Oh, death, oh, change, oh, time." And he's looking kind of distraught there. And you can barely make out on his little jacket there, it says FDR. So you make sure you understand, that that's Roosevelt. So let's see, Mariama, let's go to you here. How does the artist characterize Roosevelt's demeanor in this political cartoon?
I think it's C.
Yeah, good job, right? He looks worried, right? He's like, man, this ain't working out for me. So he is sad and dismayed that his attempt to pack the court failed. And obviously, so point of view wise, we know that the illustrator here is anti-court packing, right? He's not, now he might be a Roosevelt supporter, but at least in this instance, he is not in favor of that idea and believes this has been a waste of 6 months where Roosevelt could have focused his energy and time on something else. And then again, we have that same political cartoon. And then last question here, Levon, I'll go to you here. So why does the cartoonist show pages from a calendar with wings attached? Is Levon still here? Yeah, she's here.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I was reading it. I'm sorry. I should have been reading it out loud.
I think somebody left. I just wasn't sure, so I just check it.
I'm sorry, I haven't been reading it.
No, go ahead. It's fine.
A?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, 6 months' time was wasted, right? It's just gone the way of the dodo. It's flying away. So that's the representation there with the little wings on the calendar. Nothing's been achieved, and it's just flown out the window. So yeah, good job. Yeah, so that's our little quiz there on cartoons. I will, down the road, when we talk a little more about history, show you guys some more political cartoons and get you familiar with some more historical content there. We'll look at the Essential Ed lesson. And
sorry, not to get thrown off the topic, but why will we so if the Supreme Court basically makes all the judges with the Constitution and all that, what's the purpose of a president if they can't make the decisions and they still got to answer to the Supreme Court?
We'll talk about that down the road to some greater detail. But so the government's set up, the federal government and all the state governments sort of imitate the federal government to some degree. But what we stress is the separation of powers, right? So we have 3 equal branches of government, and sometimes that works more efficiently, and other times there's just stalemate. So the president is the head of state and the chief officer of the executive branch, right? So his cabinet and he sets an agenda, he promotes certain legislation, but of course it's up to the House of Representatives and the Senate to, actually write legislation and put that into, or, make amendments, vote on them. If they vote there, then it goes to the president, right? So the Supreme Court, are there to balance out the legislative branch and the executive branch by ensuring that any laws that are passed are constitutional. And of course, yeah, it gets really complicated. So that's why FDR wanted to expand the court, right? So he could get more, I guess you could say, progressive or liberal leaning judges. So that's why there's always a fight. And that's why there's always a big hullabaloo when there is a Supreme Court justice nominated. And, if you remember from, the whole ugly scene with Merrick Garland at the end of President Obama's administration, where they refused to give him a hearing, and then allow Donald Trump to nominate and appoint 2 new justices, right? So it skewed the court more conservative at that point, or actually 3 justices, right? Because he had who cares? It doesn't matter. Barrett is the only one I can think of right now. But so there's good in that, because even if we're if you lean one political way or another, at some point you want to have a little bit of you want to have that system of checks and balances. And sometimes it goes your way and sometimes it doesn't. So yeah, if Joe Biden expanded the court, that might work for a number of years, but then down the road somewhere, it's going to go back the other way, where you would have a bunch of conservative judges or something like that. So in what we're seeing right now, it's one of those times where you have justices from one political party or lean in one political ideology. And it does sort of, skew things. And it does sometimes hold up maybe, things that might help us along the way, which is the same thing that's happening in the Senate, right? Because it's almost split 50-50. And you have some Democratic senators who are almost right of center, like guys like Joe Manchin and everything. So yeah, it's in the way it was designed, it was a series of checks and balances, that no one branch of government would get too much power. And sometimes it works and sometimes it causes gridlock. So that's about the best explanation. We'll talk a little bit more about that down the road too. So I hope that kind of helps there. All right, but good question. I'm glad you asked. So we're going to move on here. So identifying propaganda. So we'll take a listen here. I'm afraid this might be Dwayne again, so bear with us. Oh, we listen to Dwayne. Maybe. Dwayne, are you there? Dwayne.
Oh, hey, dude. Welcome to the lesson on identifying propaganda. This lesson will teach you how to identify when a piece of media is trying to manipulate you using propaganda.
And something else again to point out here, it's not just political. It can be, things you see on TV, just commercials, advertisements. And the other thing that's important here, that when we get into it, they're going to start talking about different types of rhetorical techniques, different ways that propaganda is presented to you, the techniques they use, which will come in handy as well because they're also used in persuasive writing. So when we talk about persuasive writing, when we're talking about our extended response and writing about those things, you'll be looking and trying to identify when they use particular techniques. So pay attention here and we'll go through them.
Even if you aren't familiar with the term propaganda, odds are good you've seen a bunch of it already. Here in the U.S., propaganda is pretty common in advertising, especially online. It's become more common in politics, too. So what is it? What is propaganda? Well, propaganda is a kind of information that tries to trick you into forming an opinion about something. It's trying to get you to think or do something that doesn't necessarily benefit you. Here, take a look at this magazine ad. It's for a new gaming mouse called the Precisionator 7. The ad says, it's the only mouse for true gamers. The only mouse for true gamers? Yeah, right. Sure it is. But you see what the ad is trying to do? It's trying to convince PC gamers, people like me, that we won't be considered a serious gamer unless we buy this mouse. And dude, that's not at all true. Do you notice how the ad doesn't actually say anything about the mouse? Well, that's because there's nothing good to say about this mouse. It's junk. I'm surprised they can sell any of these things. But some poor kid might see this ad and decide that he wants a Precisionator 7 for Christmas. Not because the mouse is good for gaming, but because he wants to be considered a serious gamer. The company it's selling an image of yourself as a pro gamer. And that's just one propaganda technique. I'm going to go over 7 of these things. You ready?
Yeah, and here's what I was mentioning, and he'll talk about them some, particularly with the appeals to identity, things like bandwagon transfer, plain folks, all these types of appeals and things. You're going to come across when we start talking about our written responses here, our extended responses. All right, so let's go on here.
A lot of the time, propaganda will try to make a bad idea seem like a good idea with something positive. There are 2 appeals to association to watch out for: glittering generalities and testimonial. I'm sure you've seen both of these before. Glittering generalities is a kind of propaganda that heaps vague praise on something to make it seem like it's really special. Get a load of this example. This propaganda is laying it on thick. Rob Lexington is a true American. He works tirelessly to defend you. I mean, he is a champion after all. What else would he do? You can also see this propaganda talks about God, life, liberty, and happiness. These are words with positive associations. This technique is usually pretty easy to spot. Just look for the heaping praise without many actual details or examples. Next up is...
Actually, I want to just stop here real quick and talk about this for a second. So it's also, the appeal to the common man in political terms is also called populism. So let's say you're, I don't know, a millionaire real estate mogul who eats his pizza with a fork and his fried chicken with a fork. And you want to make this connection with, Joe Schmo that makes $40,000 a year, driving a truck or, with an electrician, all these kind of working class people. So you have this whole strategy and the language and how you speak and, your whole agenda is moved towards, this everyman kind of idea. So that's kind of populism. And that sort of was, what's kind of speaking here right now, right? I mentioned sort of the senatorial race in Ohio. We just got through the Republican primaries not that long ago. If you couldn't miss one, if you turned on, one of your local broadcasting networks, if you watched the NBC or ABC, CBS, anything like that, you saw Mike Gibbons and Josh Mandel and J.D. Vance and all these guys. Now that the primary's over, we're seeing Tim Kaine and J.D. Vance, because J.D. Vance won the primary and Tim Kaine's going to be most likely the Democratic candidate for the Senate. And you're seeing them start to sort of, get snippy at each other in their campaign ads and everything. So, and that is propaganda. No matter how you feel about one candidate or the other, a lot of times they're going to use harsh language towards one another. Tim Kaine, I noticed when in his ads, he's never wearing a suit. He's been talking about like bringing manufacturing and stuff back to Ohio, but you'll notice he is sort of kind of connecting with that, not necessarily, I don't want to go as far as saying populism, but, just sort of that working class sort of person.
Without many actual details or examples. Next up is the testimonial. You've seen those commercials where a celebrity promotes a product, right? That's a propaganda technique, dude. The propaganda is trying to exploit your love of the celebrity in order to sell you something. After all, if you love the celebrity, wouldn't you also want to drink the soda he drinks, wear the shoes he wears, eat the food he likes? the advertiser sure hopes so. Keep in mind, though, that a testimonial doesn't have to come from a celebrity, and it doesn't have to be an ad. Testimonials can come from anyone that people respect or admire. You might see a police officer promoting a new anti-crime bill, or a doctor promoting a new medical treatment. The important thing to remember is who's talking and why. Just because the speaker is beloved or respected doesn't mean they're giving you good information. So, should you ignore praise and reject
testimonials, right? That's something else you see all the time on television. And yeah, I mean, when an athlete endorses a shoe or something like that, that really fits well. That kind of makes sense and stuff like that. Something that we see almost exclusively in the United States that is nowhere else in the world is advertising prescription medications. So you get, again, just like political ads on TV, you couldn't go an entire commercial break right now on television without seeing Rivalti or something or Tardive, all these drugs being marketed to people that can't actually go to a store and buy them unless you have a prescription for them. Look at the bottom of the screen when you see one of those ads. There was one right after the Olympics. There was a dude, Brian Lochte, you might remember him. He was a swimmer, gold medalist. And right after the last Summer Olympics, he started doing ads for some migraine medication. And the little tiny text at the bottom of the screen, it says, Ryan Lochte does not suffer from migraines and does not take Migralax or whatever the prescription was. If you look at those ads at the very bottom of the screen, you'll always see it says, paid actors. Sometimes some of those prescription drugs, they'll have like actual, patients who are taking it. Most of the time, though, in those ads, everybody out flying kites after they've taken their anti-anxiety medication or they're fishing or they're running or whatever. You look on the bottom of the screen, it'll say like paid actors or, something like that. So, and the same thing with, these other celebrities.
Product endorsed by a celebrity? Nah, dude. Just be aware of what the propaganda is trying to do. Maybe that celebrity really does have great taste in shoes, but don't buy them just because the celebrity wears them. Maybe that new anti-crime bill is a great idea, but don't support it just because a cop says you should. You've got to try on that shoe. You've got to read that bill. A professional opinion has value, but don't just assume that the professional has your best interests in mind. You can't let other people do your thinking for you. Do your homework, dude. So, you ready? Let's see if you can identify an appeal to association.
All right, here we go. We'll practice question here. Let's see what we got.
What kind of propaganda techniques does this passage demonstrate?
All right, let's see our passage here. So it says, Andrew Spacey is a chiropractor with a practice in Los Angeles. He spent the last 3 months trying out our Foot Friend shoe. Says, we don't really stop to think about how much we use our feet. They carry our weight wherever we go and whatever we do, every day, all day. That's why our choice of shoe is so important. I can't tell you how many patients I've had who suffered from leg, hip, and back pain due to poor arch support from their choice of footwear. Your feet are the foundation of your body. A bad foundation can cause health issues all the way up your spine. Foot Friend shoes have the arch support of an engineering marvel. My arches have never felt so secure. I'm on my feet all day, but thanks to Foot Friend's patented memory foam padding, I feel as though I'm walking on a cloud. Before Foot Friend, I couldn't wait to get off my feet at the end of the day. Now, thanks to Foot Friend's innovative design, I can play basketball with my son after a long day at the office. Foot Friend has helped me be the father I always hoped to be. Thanks, Foot Friend, from Andrew Spacey. Let's see, Jessica, looking at that. So what type of propaganda are we seeing here?
Testimonial.
And we also have glittering generalities, which is a little more subtle. But yeah, you definitely picked up there, right? Because we have a doctor, a chiropractor, and there's got to be careful with chiropractors. A good chiropractor can help you. A bad chiropractor can paralyze you. So, here, basically we understand right away that there's a testimonial because we have a doctor speaking about a product. It's really sort of in this last paragraph that we hear the glittering generalities, right? So just like we were talking about any type of strong language, when we came across that yesterday, we're talking about point of view or opinions and things like that. So engineering marvel, right? That's high praise for a shoe. My feet never felt so secure. I'm on my feet all day, blah, 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 memory foam padding. I feel as though I'm walking on a cloud. The 4-foot friend, I couldn't wait to get off my feet at the end of the day. Okay. Now I can play basketball with the sun and hope to be and help me be the father I always hoped to be, right? That's really sort of flowery and out there kind of, messaging. So that's what you look for, words like that signaling, a glittering generality, engineering marvel. We're talking about a shoe here. Are they really reinventing the wheel? Are they reinventing a shoe, or is it just another shoe? So things like that is a type of glittering generality.
Great job. As a chiropractor, the author's opinion might be seen as having more authority in declaring the health benefits of the shoe. This is a testimonial. The author also uses glowing terms when describing the shoe, which is a sign of glittering generalities.
In the COVID era, something that started happening when we started hearing a lot about sort of the pushback on vaccination. These so-called experts started coming out of the woodwork. Dr. So-and-so or this pharmaceutical insider. You'd hear things like that a lot. And you have to be careful. For starters, you don't immediately just ignore what they have to say. But you have to take into account, when somebody says something like that, pharmaceutical insider, and then it turns out they're a sales rep, right? That's not a reliable source of information when it comes to deciding on whether or not you should get a vaccination, right? If it's your own, the first thing you should always do is listen to your own doctor. What your doctor tells you is who you should trust. Virologists, things like that, immunologists. But particularly, that's another type of it falls into this category of testimonials, but they are very careful on how they present their expert, right? Dr. So-and-so. Well, if I finish my PhD, I get to call myself Dr. Johnson, right? Are you going to come to me about, a heart condition? Right. No, you shouldn't do that. If you got a question about history, I can help you with that. But they will mask, they could just put Dr. Johnson and they could have me on television talking about COVID. And unless you actually, did your research and find out that I'm just a stupid historian, you have to be careful about the credibility. So that's another way testimonials sometimes will mask, just throw it out there, or this type of expert. Forensic researcher is a new term I've heard, talking about, voting fraud. And then you find out the guy doesn't have any type of background. It's just a dude, who's, got some crazy conspiracy theory. So titles you got to really watch out for, and sometimes do some further investigation to find out, is this person a real expert? Do they have legitimate training in that area, experience in that area?
The next category of propaganda techniques is called appeals to identity. These are techniques that try to exploit how you see yourself or how you want to see yourself. There are 3 kinds: plain folks, transfer, and bandwagon. Plain folks is a technique that tries to trick the audience into thinking the speaker is just a regular Joe, someone who understands the experiences of the common man. This puts the audience at ease It makes them more likely to believe what the speaker is saying. Take a look at this. Do you see what's going on here? Look at the way the speaker drops his G's at the end of words. That isn't an accident, dude. Dropping your G's makes you sound casual, more folksy. And look at what the speaker is talking about. Working, struggling, and uncertainty. These are working class concerns. This text could be written by an ad agency and performed by an actor. But because it sounds like plain folks, you might see more working class people voting for Rob Lexington. You've already seen the next technique, transfer. Remember the Precisionator ad? That's transfer in action, dude. Transfer tries to encourage you to see yourself as part of something cool. This ad wants you to think of yourself as a serious gamer, so you'll buy the mouse used by serious gamers. The technique is called transfer because it's trying to transfer your good feelings about one thing over to something else, something that the propaganda wants you to like.
Those prescription medication ads I talk about, there's a lot of transfer in that, right? The way people are represented, whatever the medication is, whether it's for your anxiety or your rash or whatever it is, your eczema, everybody's having a good time in those ads, right? Everybody's living it up, that not letting whatever type of condition they have stop them. Once they start taking this medication, they're out there riding their bicycle and eating ice cream and surfing or whatever. That's sort of an idea of transfer. It's going to be related a little bit to the next one.
Lastly, you have bandwagon. Bandwagon is an invitation to belong to a group. Check this out. Yeesh. Can you imagine having to buy a whole new wardrobe every year? This advertiser sure can. The bandwagon technique plays on your fear of missing out, of not belonging. So, either you buy the new fall fashion line, or you're a fashion pariah. Whatever that means. I guess it's a good thing I can't afford to be fashionable. Anyway, bandwagon is pretty easy to spot. Just look for the "you're missing out" language. So that's it for appeals to identity. Think you can identify them?
Did anybody as a child or as a teenager hear from your mother, if everybody jumps off a bridge, are you going to also? Right? That's bandwagon, right? You come home from school and everybody's got this pair of shoes, or everybody's going to movies tonight or something, and your mother says, if everybody jumps off a bridge, you got to do so too, right? That's bandwagon. Right. And your mother was certainly very well of what bandwagon appeal was. So that's one, particularly bandwagon. That's one rhetorical device we're going to see in extended responses as well. Everybody's doing it. You should too. That's kind of the bandwagon idea. It can get kind of confusing with transfer. Right. But transfer is sort of just like making you seeing yourself in that role, right? Bandwagon is sort of like seeing yourself as part of that group. So slight difference between the two. All right, I think we'll have a question here.
What kind of propaganda techniques does this passage demonstrate?
All right, let's take a look here. Charles Watson and Torres, LLC, is thrilled to announce a new company-wide program called Skin in the Game. Our goal is to reward team members who go the extra mile, work the extra day, and stay the extra hour. Each team member will be scored weekly on a variety of metrics ranging from tickets closed to hours worked. At the end of each week, if your performance warrants it, you will be placed into a bronze, silver, or gold award level. In the week that follows, bronze level members will be allowed access to the executive break room. You know what that means, right? Free donuts. Silver members will also have access to the break room, but also receive a $25 gift card to sleeping, bathing, and more. Gold members will receive all the benefits of the lesser levels, but will also be given priority for time off requests. So here's a chance to show that you have some skin in the game. Don't be a minimum effort, unranked team member. Embody the excellence, drive, and work ethic that make our company great. You know you don't want to miss out on those donuts. All right, so little perks program, very much tied to productivity. Let's see, Nautica, I'll go back to you again. What kind of propaganda technique do we see in that sort of program?
Bandwagon, of course. What exactly is plain folks again?
Speaking to the common man, just your everyday Joe kind of idea, more of a political idea in plain folks, put it that way.
I think it's bandwagon and transfer.
See, I thought so as well. Now they're going to tell us it's just bandwagon. And I was trying to reason through this myself because I kind of thought the same way here. I guess their idea, we'll listen to Dwayne here, see what he says.
Great job. The passage implores the reader to not be a minimum effort unranked team member and reminds them that they don't want to miss out. This language implies there is shame in not being a member of a ranked group and a reward for joining. This is a classic bandwagon strategy.
Yeah, so more of just being part of the crowd is what they're looking for here. But I can kind of see that sort of idea of transfer, of putting yourself in that spot as that gold level, getting your donut, your $25 gift card, and your vacation. Also, sort of having that transfer of living that sort of life. But I guess when it just wasn't enough there, so they're looking in their mindset of more of a being part of the in crowd. You're probably not going to run into these a lot on the test. You are certainly going to see bandwagon. You should definitely know what that is. Transfer, I don't know if that's going to be something that you should have to really concern yourself a whole lot with. The next stuff you're going to see too is going to be kind of important in the long run when it comes to critical thinking. If it'll load up here.
The last category of propaganda is misleading information. This kind of propaganda tries to manipulate you with false, incomplete, or emotionally charged information. There are two kinds: card stacking and name calling. Card stacking, are you familiar with that term? It's from gambling. It's a way to cheat at cards. Instead of shuffling the deck, the cheater arranges the cards to give themselves an unfair advantage. Card stacking propaganda works the same way, by leaving out information or by making an unfair comparison. Card stacking can be hard to spot because you don't know what you don't know. Here, let me show you what I mean. Take a look at this ad. At first glance, this looks like a no-brainer, right? Get Gone has fewer calories, less sodium, and lower sugar. Heck, Get Gone even has 3% of your recommended daily vitamin C. Bonus! But what if I told you that this advertisement is comparing a small Get Gone energy drink with a large Power Up drink? Pretty sneaky, right? And what if I told you that Power Up gives you 3% of your recommended daily iron and calcium? The ad doesn't mention that, does it? See? That's card stacking. So how do you spot card stacking if you don't know what you don't know? Well, dude, you gotta look at the kind of information it's showing you. Or not showing you. This ad doesn't tell you anything about the size of the drinks that it's comparing. That's pretty suspicious. And what's up with only mentioning vitamin C? There are all kinds of vitamins, right? Why mention vitamin C only? Well, because it's stacking the deck. The propaganda is only going to mention the comparisons where it looks good. Don't let them trick you, dude. It pays to be skeptical. Lastly, there's name calling. This one is exactly what it sounds like, and it's usually pretty easy to spot. It works similar to transfer, but instead of making positive associations, it makes negative associations. Look here. Whoa, look at these words, will you? Oligarch, disguised, anti-worker, anti-consumer, hobble, destroy. This makes Lexington sound like a giant monster rampaging across town. Spotting this kind of propaganda isn't the hard part. The hard part is seeing through it. What do these names mean? What are they saying? Are they exaggerating the truth? Or are they accurate? Are these names putting a bad spin on something you actually agree with? Does the idea have any merit without the name-calling? Name-calling tries to trigger your emotions, dude, so you want to stay calm. Think it through. Don't get swept up in the negativity. Well, that's it for misleading information. Let's see if you've got this.
So card stacking, another way in the history world where I come from, we call that cherry picking. So if somebody is writing a thesis or a dissertation or even in books, and they present an argument, and then they're very choosy in making sure that the evidence that they use always supports their claim, and they're very unlikely to refute other evidence. So that's same thing as card stacking, right? Where you're very strategic about the information that you present, right? And then the information that you leave out. And I'm sitting here, I got a box of graham crackers on my counter. Hold on a sec. So I'm just wondering here, because it says here it's some Kroger cinnamon graham crackers. I like peanut butter graham crackers. So naturally flavored. It says right there at the top, naturally flavored. What, oh, that sounds great. If we look here, ingredients, enriched flour, that's not natural. Reduced iron, thiamine mononitrate, riboflavin, gram flour, whole wheat flour, sugar, high oleic canola and or soybean oil, citric acid for freshness, contains less than 2% of molasses, honey, leavening, salt, dextrose, cinnamon, soy, lecithin, sodium, sulfite, natural flavor. That's the last ingredient. So if you're familiar with, labels, the ingredients are listed by the amount that's in there, right? So enriched flour means that's what most of this graham cracker is made of, is flour. And the final ingredient there is natural flavor. But, right, cherry picking, card stacking, we're going to put that on the box here. And of course, also the thing to look for is there added sugar in anything you eat? And yeah, there's 8 grams of added sugar. Yummy, yummy, yummy sugar. But see, that's card stacking. And there's, on every label that you encounter, you're probably going to see something like that. Oh my God. I don't know if Hershey still does this or other companies do this. But they will put on a giant bottle of chocolate syrup, fat-free, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure. It's, it's cocoa and, and it's sugar. It's piles and piles of sugar. So yeah, it's 0 fat in a bottle of chocolate syrup. Are you going to pour that down your gullet for lunch? No. They'll do everything they can to sort of twist up products to make them look healthier than what they are. And that's just some examples. And that's some examples of card stacking, where you really have to look at the label and not just look at, the little, the pretty packaging and whatever's on there, because they're going to represent that on the front. And the real information is going to be on the side in the nutrition label. So that's the type of card stacking. Name calling. That's also it can be an ad hominem attack, where you go after the person rather than what they're saying. That's a lot of times really obvious to spot, because they'll use strong language like what they had in the ad there. Going back again with political ads that we're seeing, anytime that one candidate mentions the other one, somehow they'll have them look, if they put a picture of them up, they'll do like a black and white sort of shady picture. They'll make sure that it's grainy. They'll make sure they look all wrinkled, anything like that to help them look better, right? So you look out for strong language when it comes to those types of attacks. And again, that doesn't mean any of this means that any of those things are wrong. Or that they're misrepresenting them to some degree. But even if you're still in favor of that, make sure that you sort of understand the message behind it, because they could be sort of putting on some extra show there to get your support. All right, we probably got a last question here before we go to the practice questions.
What kind of propaganda techniques does this passage demonstrate?
All right, let's take a look here. Oh, we just got to add for Sunray crackers. So the healthy choice, low cholesterol, lower sodium than you might expect, less fat than the leading brand of cracker. Kate, let's see. We're talking about Sunray crackers here. The healthy choice, low cholesterol, low sodium, less fat. What type of propaganda technique might be involved here?
It's B.
What was that?
B. Both card stacking and name color.
So just card stacking, right? Because we do have just one ad, right? So if it was comparing it to another product and it was calling it gross or unhealthy or something like that, we might get into some name calling. But since it's just the one product, we have card stacking, right? Like he said, we don't know what we don't know sometimes. And there's other kind of clues to that too. Lower sodium than you might expect. Well, I might expect 0 sodium. So that's, kind of a weird, way to advertise it. Less fat than leading brand of cracker. Okay. But what else is in there? Is there a ton of, something else that might not be good for you? Low cholesterol. Okay, that's fine. The healthy choice, right there, that's subjective. There's no, how do you quantify that, right? What metric means it's healthy? So those are things that you can kind of investigate. But yeah, so basically what they're saying here is a card stacking.
Great job.
Cherry picking the information.
This is a very common use of card stacking. All of the information in this ad is carefully selected to make the product seem healthy and desirable. What about other health considerations like calories per serving or the presence of trans fats? This kind of information would be useful to know, but it isn't mentioned.
All right, and then we'll finish up here. Guys, take about 10 minutes with the
Cool.
practice questions.
Nice job working on those exercises. Are you ready to do some practice problems?
Yeah, we're just gonna
get you
skip
back on
Dwayne
track
here. Oh, Dwayne. I'll stop sharing my screen for now. If you guys have any questions, let me know. And right around 10, we'll just go to about 1:38 or so. I'll jump back in and we'll finish up and move over to language arts. So guys, go ahead and take some time on your so yeah. The thing about lessons like this, right? We're continuing to build our critical thinking skills. And the idea, is largely, above and beyond your class and everything else. I want to make you guys healthy skeptics, right? So that means questioning what you read. Not being cynical where you suddenly think that everybody or everything has an agenda and you turn into conspiracy theorists, but it's perfectly healthy to look at what you're reading, look at what you see on television and question. It's like, am I getting all the information here? Am I, is anything missing? Can this be trusted? And that will come into play as we move along and we add more critical thinking skills. We're going to get into a little bit of that with language arts because they're going to be summarizing and paraphrasing. But that's sort of the idea here, particularly with social studies, just kind of questioning what you see, questioning what you're reading and thinking more deeply about it, right? That's the overall idea there. So let's go ahead. If you guys want to finish up, well, actually first, before I go any further, any questions on propaganda, political cartoons, I'm going to continue to fill in our history as we go along, so don't worry about that. Anything else I can help with? Okay.
Hold on. I'm gonna put my thing on mute. Okay, hold on.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. What was that? Madison, what was that?
1 second, please.
The other thing I want to mention, so, if it, just like with Rachel's class, if you miss a class, if something happens, you're late to a class or anything, I always post the recording on Google Classroom after our classes, so you can review everything there. There's additional information, some supplemental material as well. So if you need more help, obviously you can always reach out to me, but that's all going to be there for the lesson as well. So you can kind of catch up and just make sure that you get your lesson finished. So let's go ahead. We'll go to 150 for our break, and we'll jump into language arts there. And I'll send out a message, of course, here. All right. So let's take about a 10-minute break, and I'll see everybody in language arts. All right. Bye-bye.